All right, let's get started. So today for World Civ, we're going to be looking at mostly the 1990s. Like really, we're just looking after the Cold War for China, Japan, and the Koreas. Our essential questions today are: what political and social changes has China undergone in the late 20th and early 21st centuries? What changes have occurred in Japan from the 1990s to the present? And what are the major differences between North Korea and South Korea? So China after Mao. Um, so after Mao's death in 1976, we had some reformers led by Xiaoping, instituted modernization policies. There was also an agricultural reform where, under the new agricultural policy, peasants could lease land and sell crops for profit. So we're starting to see, rather than the government owning all the land, um, we have just normal people who are able to have land. Um, There'll also be a movement for democracy. Protesters will complain that like all these new programs, like agriculture programs and stuff, don't include any democracy. And then there'll be protests against corruption. By the late 1980s, protesters were calling for an end to corruption and for the resignation of China's aging Communist Party leaders. Tiananmen Square. So this is a place in China, believing that protesters in a massive demonstration in Tiananmen Square were calling for an end to communist rule. Xiaoping ordered tanks and troops to crush the demonstration. And I mean, this super famous, super, just crazy. Yeah. So Liu Xiaobo is a Chinese intellectual and human rights activist who has called for democratic reforms in China. In the days leading up to the Tiananmen Square incident of 1989, Liu served as an advisor to the student protesters and joined protest leaders in a week-long hunger strike. After Chinese military forcibly cleared the square on the night of June 3rd through June 4th, Liu was arrested. He spent 21 months in prison for his role in the protests. Upon his release, Liu continued his criticism of the Chinese Communist Party and was again arrested in 1996 for advocating the release of those still imprisoned as a result of the Tiananmen Square protests. In 2008, Liu helped draft a 19-point program that called for greater political freedoms in China, which was signed by more than 300 academics and intellectuals. Liu was arrested hours before the document's release onto the internet, and at a trial following the following year, he was sentenced to 11 years in prison for subversion. In 2010, Liu was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize, and the Chinese government condemned the award. During this time, there was also a lot of unrest among minorities. There's actually a lot of minority groups in China that have often resisted assimilation into Chinese society, Tibetans being one of the more notable examples. Another textbook excerpt. So before the 1950s, Tibet was a unique cultural and religious community marked by the Tibetan language and Tibetan Buddhism. There was little communication with outsiders and economic development was minimal. Tibet's incorporation into the People's Republic of China began in 1950 and has remained a highly controversial issue. Many Tibetans consider China's action to be an invasion of a sovereign country. They regard the continued Chinese presence in Tibet as an occupation by a foreign power. The Chinese believe that Tibet has been a rightful part of China for centuries and claim they liberated Tibet from a repressive feudal regime. There is some truth on both sides, although public opinion outside China has tended to support Tibet's status as an independent or at least highly autonomous entity. Between 1963 and 1971, no foreign visitor was allowed to enter Tibet. Repression greatly decreased in the late 1970s with the end of the Cultural Revolution. However, repressive measures were used when riots broke out in Tibet in the late 1980s. And after protests erupted in the 2008 before Beijing Summer Olympic Games, China has invested heavily in the economic development of Tibet, including the development of its mineral and power generating resources, and has improved Tibet's infrastructure through highway and railroad construction. All right, so we're going to take a look at mostly their economy in China. So Chinese society in recent times, so family values, family is huge for them. And we've also seen a return of some freedoms. After Mao's death and the end of the Cultural Revolution, more value was placed on the family, and Chinese people regained some freedoms. China's always had a big population. Part of the reason why they have over 1 billion people today is, they started out with more people. So in an effort to control their population growth since 1979, the Chinese government has used incentives to encourage people to limit families to one child. Most of those policies did end in the 1990s, though. Like the more crazy strict ones. Most of these incentives would be things like advertisement, trying to get people to do family planning, that kind of a thing. China also has an aging population, so because less babies are being born, right? And because, modern medicine and stuff like that, so lower birth rate and an increased life expectancy, which means people are living longer. We have a lot more elderly people in China. And that can be a really big problem when we're looking at things like economics, because, at some point the elderly will leave the workforce and then become dependent in society. Anyway. China's economic growth. So in the 1990s and the 2000s, China's rapid industrial growth continued, as did domestic and foreign investment, and international trade relations were strengthened. Cost of growth. So industrial workers have been unsatisfied with their wages and working conditions, and many farmers, unhappy with their income, have moved to cities where most have poor living conditions. So taking a look at Japan, the collapse of the Japanese real estate market in the 1980s led to a recession in the 1990s. This put further strain on the economy. And, with a lot of people reaching retirement age, that's also been a problem. Japan also has an aging population, more so than China. And so, just their economy's the past 25 years has been pretty strained. The slowing of economic growth led to a decline in consumer confidence and spending, meaning, people are like, oh, the economy's not doing so great, and so they stop spending so much money, which just kills the economy. Consumers have also noted a decline in the quality of Japanese manufactured products. In 2010, China passed Japan to become the world's second largest economy. All right, and then the Koreas. So North Korea is politically isolated, ruled by a military dictatorship. North Korea has been, they've had issues with drought, famine, and economic problems in recent years. North Korea, if you look at the physical geography, there's a lot of mountains and stuff, and it's actually pretty hard to grow a lot of crops, and then you add drought and famine on top of that, and it's just hard. In South Korea, military leaders have been democratically replaced with civilian ones. Tensions with North Korea have continued. Lots of their economy's better in South Korea. Lots of stuff with that. Oh, I forgot to put the other slide. I wanted to show you guys, since this lesson talked a little about populations and aging populations, I wanted to show you this website. I do this with my geography students, but none of you will take geography with me because you're all past 9th grade. So this is populationpyramid.net. There's also gapminder.net, which does a really good job. So right here, so this is for the whole world in 2019. It gives us a world population it splits it up by age and sex. So, right, we can look and see, okay, between the ages of 0 and 4, there are 328 million females and 349 million males, right? And we can go and look at the different ages on the side and percentages of the population on the bottom. And then over here, we have a population graph showing like the growth, right? So world population is growing. By 2100, we'll be past 10 billion people, closer to 11 billion people. So let's take a look at China. All of China. Okay, so this is China. So there's a lot of things to look at here, right? So China's population, 2019, 1.4 billion people. Let's take a look at this graph right here, because this is the interesting part. So with these graphs, what you want to see is you want to see a bigger bottom than your top. That shows that your population is growing. And if it's pretty much straight up and down, that's like the perfectly stable, right? You actually want it like slightly bigger at the bottom. Like that's what you're looking for. If we look here at this population graph, we can see, right, we have these couple bigger bumps. So this would be it's like a baby boom, a baby deficit, and then an echo of a baby boom. But right, this big group of people, right, they are reaching retirement age, and when they reach retirement age, that's going to cause a lot of problems in their economy. If we look down here, right, there are a lot less people between the ages of like 0 and 4, 5 to 9, 10 to 14, 15 to 19 than there are 50 to 54-year-olds, right? We can also look at this, right, and see what's going on, right? So their expected population trajectory, right? Then let's take a look at Japan's. This is Japan's. Yeah, so if you notice right here, right, their curve is a lot more like sharply declining crash and burn kind of scenarios. And we see similar things. So already their aging population is retiring or already is retired. Right, and then there's another group coming. And check out this 0 to 4. Super tiny. Also check out the 100+ years old. People who have made it to 100 or more. Look how many more females there are. Isn't that crazy? Anyway, sorry. I'm a data nerd. Hopefully you guys found that at least a little bit interesting. But yeah, if you're interested in like demographics and stuff like that, this is a great site to go and play around with. For fun, we'll do compared with the United States, right? This is ours growing. Okay. All right, so your assignment today should be pretty easy. You just have to type yes or no like 4 times after reading some stuff. I've updated my policies for late work with everything that's going on and stuff. I know a lot of you have reached out and told me that you're feeling really overwhelmed and stuff, and then just falling behind, that just makes it worse. So make sure you read those policies. If you have any questions, please reach out to me. And yeah, I hope you guys have a great day.